Let religion be to all of us life and joy. Let religion be to all of us a voice of renewing challenge to the best that we have and may be. Let religion be a call to generous action. May we have hope and purpose in a discovering of the opportunities to express our very best through our daily work. Religion, may it unite us with all that is admirable in human beings everywhere. Namaste. I'm Reverend Bob Murphy, mutual aid minister, community minister for the Unitarian Universalists here in Florida, and I'd like to do three things at the beginning of this presentation. First, I want to acknowledge that we are in the ancestral homeland for the Tocobaga people, Seminole people, for other indigenous peoples, and many of those tribes continue in this present moment. Second, I want to acknowledge that I'm wearing an apron. Okay, it's a Unitarian, it's a Unitarian Universalist apron. It asks us to side with love, and I'm wearing this apron in honor of the Labor Day weekend and working people, just generally, not just bakers and cooks, but all kinds of working people. And then third, I want to, and this is especially important, introduce our special guest speaker, Mia Rawls. Mia Rawls is a labor union activist. She is involved here in Florida, in the central part of Florida, with the American Federation of Government Employees Union. American Federation of Government Employees Union. She is a union steward, a labor union scholar, and a community activist in Pasco County. And Mia is a federal public service employee and a radical advocate for marginalized groups here in Florida. We're very grateful that Mia is with us here for the Labor Day weekend, and I introduce Mia Rawls.
Good morning. It is a specific honor and a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm a little scared to get too close to the microphone, but I have a loud speaking voice thanks to growing up in Georgia and my mother and my grandmother, so I think this is sufficient. Can everybody hear me? Yes, okay, very good. I had a PowerPoint presentation, some things got a little caught in the crossfire, so I'm just gonna speak verbally and I'm gonna speak from the heart. So thank you for your time here today, and it's an honor to be here for the Labor Day weekend. Reverend Murphy went through my introduction here, so I'm not gonna go through that again. But speaking today as a faith practitioner and a federal public service employee and a friend to the working class, people who are disabled, people who are homeless, anyone who needs outreach, wants outreach. This is the reason why we do this work and why we show up specifically in faith spaces to have these conversations. Now, this is a Universalist church. It is a blend of beliefs, a blend of concepts, and I do understand that. So I am going to briefly, this is not a Bible thumping session, so I don't want to scare anybody, but I'm going to do a very quick grounding. I grew up in a Baptist church, so I'm going to start there, but I won't scare you. In Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 through 10, it says, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we don't give up." And says, we have the opportunity, let us do good unto others, especially those of the household of faith. And then in Proverbs chapter 38, chapter 31, verse 8 and 9, "Speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed." Yes, speak up for the poor and the helpless and ensure that they get justice. There's not very many times in the Bible where God repeats himself, so I always enjoy an emphasis or mentioning the emphasis on that. In many instances, faith calls on us to advocate for the poor, to be neighborly, and to follow the examples of various prophets. In the Deep South, churches were ground zero for community activism and participation, especially in the civil rights movement. Places of worship still play a vital role in community uplifting and development. This responsibility, in fact, has long been overshadowed by patriarchal ideas of faithfulness and white supremacy, radical evangelicalism, masked as the highest form of dedication to God and religious practice. The Universalist Church has proven to be a leading example in the intersections of faith and activism and community advocacy, especially when it comes to unions and labor union membership, especially when it comes to worker justice, fighting for higher wages and racial equity, especially when it comes to acknowledging who this land that we're standing on belongs to in the first place. We should use what we know to be true through our character, what we believe as people of faith, in our connection as community members to continue to do the work that needs to be done. What's next is members of congregations, no matter what church that is or what it looks like, we have to recognize that we are workers, whether still working or retired. I know that there's people here who are likely current or former post office employees, teachers, sanitation workers, restaurant workers, nurses, electricians, grad students, post-grads, working in the entertainment industry, et cetera. Understand that you not only have access to a union, but you have access to freedom. You have access to liberation. You have access and an opportunity to not only advocate for yourself, but for your neighbors. Our labor and collective bargaining rights are under attack, and more aggressively so since before or when Ronald Reagan was in office, and that applies to both public and private sectors. In the public sector, that looks like Social Security, Environmental Protection, CDC, and the IRS. Those agencies are specifically under attack at this moment. In the private sector, classic and specific case looks like SpaceX. I know that we've all seen that before. You have not only access to a union, but we all have the right to unionize and fight for thriving wages, a dignified retirement, free education and health care for all, and for not only for us to be able to afford these things, but to live within these things and thrive without just surviving. What you can do today is join a union, form a union, encourage your neighbors to unionize. You can see there's a theme happening here. Become a union steward. You can volunteer, as I'm sure many of you do today. Attend rallies and protests. Read about labor union history. Make content. I know there's some young people that I saw somewhere. You can learn more, do your class projects about a union that means something to you. I see you in the Kansas City Chiefs sweatshirt. I expect your report on Monday. I'm just kidding. We are responsible for bridging these generational gaps. The last thing that I'll close with is that as a person of faith, I have to acknowledge the fact that my faith and who I grew up with and, worshiping and learning about is Jesus. However, I have a very radical idea and view of what it means to be a Christian, especially from the Black Baptist tradition. Jesus was a carpenter, and if he was here today, he'd probably be the national president of the United Brotherhood of Carpenters. The story goes that he fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and just a few fish. It's important to follow examples of such, not just this blind following of what it means to be a religious person, but explicit examples of those stories. He advocated for the sick, arm in arm with those who are in society are now deemed as dangerous. He knows what it looks like to be on the front lines of literal state violence and threat and harm. And most of all, Jesus was Palestinian, and that's a fact that a lot of people seem to bypass a lot. Now's the time to become radicalized by faith and love and action and justice and the right to thrive instead of surviving. Thank you for your time today.
It's good to have Pat Benedict with us once again. And it's good to have our new friend, Mia Rawls, And me, I hope you're with us again in the future. Now, this is my moment to say a few words, just a few. Some of you will go home this afternoon, family members, friends, neighbors, co-workers perhaps, who are not here today may ask, what did that guy talk about today? You know, what points did the minister raise? You know, can you sort of give us a quick summary before lunch? And you might say, well, you know, it was Labor Day, and he said it's a religious event. It's not just a time for a mattress sale or buying a new TV or something like that, you know. He said it's a religious event. It's being reclaimed by many religious groups, and for several reasons. You might also say, well, you know, the minister had a two-part message. He said, you are what you celebrate. You are what you celebrate. And religious groups, all kinds of religious groups, everything you can name probably, we're pretty good with holidays, seasonal events, whether we're talking about cups and pagans, or whether we're talking about Buddhists or Hindus, Jews, whatever group. All the religious groups are very good at celebrations. And in the midst of holiday celebrations, they express, well, they tell us who they are, what the values are, what's important, what it is they represent in the world, the different religious groups, what it is, well, many have a sense of mission. It can vary quite a bit, as Mia has mentioned, but this is what often defines and explains organized religion. You are what you celebrate. And if you celebrate Labor Day, you're saying up front, this is important to us. This is a time when we pause and recognize and thank working people. And we listen to working people, and it's part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation for many people. We listen to working people to develop a better understanding of who they are, what they're worried about, what their hopes are for the future. You are what you celebrate. And we can recognize this point in organized religion. And I mentioned in passing that artist activists, musicians, and others are especially important because quite often organized religion seems to be more art than science. And that's a very good thing. We come together to celebrate, to enjoy each other's good company. And afterwards, after singing some songs, we get to go to the coffee hour where the celebration continues. So I want to credit and thank the cooks and bakers and the musicians, the video technicians, all of the other workers who were involved. Well, the minister is going to say a little bit more. You know that, okay? I'm going to mention the fact that the next 12 months are especially important for holiday makers because we're moving towards the 250th anniversary of signing of the Declaration of Independence. We usually say July 4th, 1776. I'm old enough to remember the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary. And religious groups, some of them were very much involved, and the theme that involved or developed with the Smithsonian Institute and with other cultural institutions was, we are a nation of nations. The great diversity of this country was recognized. Indigenous people, gay people, rich people, poor people, people of all races, all ethnic groups, people with different abilities. A nation of nations. And this was very much the theme that developed for the bicentennial back in 1976. And I think it was a very appropriate theme then, and it's still a very appropriate theme now. So we may want to think about how it is that religious groups approach the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. But the times have changed a lot during the past 50 years, and I don't know if that theme, Nation of Nations, is going to receive much serious attention in the White House, Smithsonian Institute, or some other places that can be mentioned. There is already in motion quite a campaign to control how the celebration is managed. So, for example, the White House is building a ballroom. That will soon happen. And even the dances that are danced are very, very carefully analyzed. You know, we're going to have hip-hop people there, you know, country western, you know, who's invited to the celebration. And over at the National Portrait Gallery, there's a review of exhibits. What paintings are going to be on display? Will there be a picture of Harriet Tubman, Dorothy Day, you know, Martin Luther King? You know, whose picture is going to be on display as part of the recognition of America? Who gets acknowledged? What foods will be served? Who's invited to the party? And all of these things are going to be much discussed during the next 12 months, and Unitarian Universalists, in our own way, with other groups, have opportunities to help shape the celebration. It is very important in our culture, and I make the point, it's often been said, that if you want political change, it's downstream from cultural change. Watch what happens in the culture. Watch who's invited to the party, what gets said, what dances happen, what foods get served, all of these things, what children's stories are told. All of these things help to define who we are as a nation, what it is we want, what it is we aspire to. And there's some other holidays that also need to be kept in mind. The modern celebration of Labor Day, as we understand it in Canada and in the United States, began in the 1880s with working people. And very quickly, all kinds of faith groups got involved. And starting before the First World War, there was actually a very important event called Labor in the Pulpit. I think it started in 1909. And all religious groups were encouraged to put time aside for religious observances of workers, just to give Labor Day some religious attention. And this happened in many places, including Universalist churches and Unitarian churches. But then, for several reasons, the custom died out. And I suspect that many of you really don't know this history. Many of you have never been to a religious celebration of Labor Day. Many of you have never seen clergy and choir and all sorts of religious folks get involved with Labor Day picnics and events like that. But suddenly, and for several reasons, religious groups are rediscovering the Labor Day weekend as a religious activity. You might say it's being recycled for the 21st century. We're understanding, I think we have a better understanding perhaps, of the great diversity that exists within the labor force. And that's something that we celebrate. Because when we talk about working people, we're talking about people of all races, all genders, all ethnic groups, people with different abilities, talking about a variety of age groups. Mia has mentioned retired workers, but we're concerned also with people who want to be workers, including many students who are starting their careers or just entering the workplace for the first time. So this is very much a multi-generational concern, and I especially acknowledge the young adults who are up in the balcony who are working with some of these issues. Now, I continue to work with a lot of working people, meet with them, listen to their concerns. One story in particular comes to mind, a very recent story. I know a young nutritionist who works for a state government agency here in Florida. It's a state government agency managed by the state government, but the money comes from the federal government, and much of it has to do with, well, family nutrition, reaching out to families in need, particularly low-wealth families. And she does a pretty good job. She's been involved with this for, well, actually quite a few years, but was hired just a few months ago by this particular agency. And she was hired with other people to be involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. This is about, well, almost a year ago, a bit less than a year. Okay. Several weeks ago, the young nutritionist and her team workers were called into the management office, and we're talking about political appointees in management, and they're told, "You're fired. Get out of here." Sometime in October is termination date, and they were also told, and this is what happened, "You, the group, the team, have betrayed your country. Okay? You have betrayed your country, and that is why you are being fired." And different people reacted in different ways, as you would expect, but this particular person broke into tears. And when she talks about it, sometimes she is still in tears because she has dedicated much of her working life to family nutrition, to being in the community, to helping people in need. She wants to do this good work, and she can't do it anymore because she and her teammates have been told, "You have betrayed your country." And that's the state of affairs for many working people right now. There are thousands and thousands of people, Mia has mentioned some, who are being fired because they were doing their jobs. And some of them were DEI officers. Some of them were hired because of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Many of them have been eager to do this kind of good work and related things, and they can't do it anymore, not easily. So we're talking about, for example, FEMA employees. We're talking about many teachers, librarians, social workers, and the list goes on, including military people. Of course, military people are workers. DEI programs are being closed down, and basic social services, including emergency services programs, are being closed down. And there will be more cuts in the future. At this time next year, we'll be talking about the next version of the federal budget, and we'll probably see more attacks on Medicaid, Social Security, food assistance, the National Weather Service, the list goes on. We call this the new nastiness in America, and it's not just a political phenomena, and I don't want to start naming a lot of political names. I want to emphasize that it's a cultural and a religious concern. And the big question in organized religion is, how do we respond to this? How do we deal with it in appropriate ways? I say again, we are what we celebrate, how we celebrate, who gets invited to the party, and we recognize that political change is downstream from cultural change, and that what we do often involves cultural change, encouraging people to just listen to each other and to care for each other and to act together in the right sort of way. So this is my message for the Labor Day weekend, and there'll be other holidays coming along as we move towards the 4th of July next year. Unitarian Universalists at all levels will be very much involved, but much of the work has to be done and will be done, if it happens, at the grassroots level. And some of you are going to come up to me and you're going to say, "Well, Bob, you know, what exactly do you want us to do?" And I'll say, "Well, there's a lot of things that this congregation can do, and you're already doing some of them," which is one of the reasons I enjoy being with you on Sunday mornings. Robert and others, I think there's at least a half a dozen, maybe more than that, are working with other religious groups for affordable housing. And we had some recognition just a few weeks ago of who these volunteers are and how important affordable housing is in the Tampa Bay area right now. It's a major concern for many working people. And then we have other individuals here, some of them present today, who are involved with voter registration. And that is becoming very important because democracy is in danger. Things like gerrymandering are happening. It's increasingly difficult to register and vote for mail-in ballots and there are some other problems. And we respond as chaplains and as others. We try to be in the community to encourage voter registration and try to get people to the polls. So that's another activity that already involves this congregation. But I think that sometimes most important is just to listen to working people and to bring more working people into the discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to be on the side of working people as best we can. And some of them are union members, and some of them are not, and some like unions, and some don't, and that's part of the discussion. But the larger discussion is about working people. Hopes, fears, aspirations, people coming into the working force, people being kicked out of the working force, people in retirement perhaps who remember their working days. We try to be involved with all these good folks. It's important in this congregation. I hope it's important in every congregation, and I'm grateful for what you've already accomplished. Thank you. The words are published, posted on the front door to this church this morning. The words come from Ella Baker, a very famous civil rights activist back in the 20th century. Ella Baker said, "If you give people light, they will find a way." Now, we want this congregation to be a light, not the only light in this town. Heaven forbid, we haven't got enough space in the parking lot, right? Okay. So we want every congregation, we want every individual to be a light for others. And that's important, and it's a lesson that we share on Sunday morning and on other occasions. So the words are, I don't know who put that sticker on the front door, but whoever it was, it's much appreciated. I want to actually, so we have a few minutes, say just a few words again about religious diversity, equity, and inclusion. Every major religion, without exception, every major religion, without exception, has celebrated work and working people. Now, you Buddhists are familiar with the concept of right livelihood. All right, right livelihood. The Buddha encourages all people to find the right kind of work and to be in the right place at the right time, to be peaceful, to be moral, to be with others in the right sort of way. And the Prophet Muhammad has said, work is an act of worship. This is how we worship God and how we serve each other. So work is not just 9-to-5 stuff that we have to put up with. We want to be in the right place, right time. We want to proceed in the right sort of way with others. But I would say that for many of us, not all, but many, the great champion of working people is Jesus of Nazareth, the carpenter's son. And he might at least be a union steward by now, and I think he'd probably be a pretty good one. We know surprisingly little about Jesus of Nazareth. We're reminded again and again he comes from humble folk. But there are a few things that we can sort of guess at. Okay, he's in Palestine at a time when the country is occupied by the Roman government. There's a lot of puppet rulers who are in place, who are subservient to Rome, who don't want to get in trouble with the big boss. Tiberius Caesar, I believe, at that point, but certainly the governor, Pontius Pilate, they don't want to get in trouble with Pontius Pilate. This is a time of extreme inequality in the Middle East. We're talking about wealth, especially. Wealthy landlords, some big-time merchants, and then a lot of poor people. And this is the world that Jesus knows. It's significant that actually the translation of the Bible would say that he's tectron, he's a technician of some kind. The family presumably doesn't own any land, or if it does, it's not much. It's not enough to support a family. And probably like Joseph, Jesus is a traveling worker. He's an itinerant craftsman. It's possible, perhaps likely, that he's working on city construction, highways, maybe even fortifications for the Roman government, probably wherever he can find a job. And this explains why he's away from his hometown for quite a number of years, and not unusual for working people in those days. And then he comes back to town. He makes a dramatic reappearance. And there's some controversy and all kinds of stuff happens. He's not well received by some people. This guy is obviously a radical. He's a troublemaker. All right, he goes up to the River Jordan, up by the Sea of Galilee, and he sort of finds a new crowd to hang out with, including people like Mary Magdalene and some fishermen who you've heard about. And something starts to happen. And it has a lot to do with working people. And then Jesus is gone. Many of us would say, well, we believed he was crucified, died, buried. His influence continues, but essentially Jesus isn't there anymore. But that tradition of concern for working people continues. It's still very much alive. That's what's resurrected again and again and again. And that's part of the message that we share on Sunday morning. Blessed be.